He was just a big old redneck Viking from Greenup, Kentucky. And
redneck Viking.
you know, when we were running around in the bars, not following Jesus, he was getting in fights, all this stuff. But then when he got saved, it totally, you saw, the Bible talks about the fruit of salvation. You to get through, like we were talking about the benefit. I remember when my cousin passed away. See, when I was in that heavy metal band, he was our guitar player. And my cousins, Aaron and Alan, they were just a couple years older than my brother and I. And so for us, you know, they represented like the cool older guys that we wanted to be, you know. And so like maybe my brother and I had started drinking at that point. Well, they were doing harder stuff already. And so it's like, man, this is who we want to be. And they were playing out gigs. We were just starting to play music. So they were always a little ahead of everything that we did. Well, fast forward, and our singer had become a Christian, gotten off of drugs. Well, then Aaron, my cousin, our guitar player, had gotten saved and just had a radical experience. I mean, totally different person. You know, I talked about at the event when I spoke, I said, if you wanted to see Aaron when he was his happiest, it's when he was following Jesus. He always smiled. Before that, he never smiled. He literally looked like a Viking. Like he had long hair. He was just a massive man. I mean, people thought he worked out all the time. He didn't. He was just a big old redneck Viking from Greenup, Kentucky. And
redneck Viking.
you know, when we were running around in the bars, not following Jesus, he was getting in fights, all this stuff. But then when he got saved, it totally, you saw, the Bible talks about the fruit of salvation, that you see a change in the character and the personage of a person. And so him and I especially, we were really big on this music thing now is a conduit for the message of the gospel. Well, some things happened. He ended up getting a job where he was traveling a bunch, and one beer caused him to fall back into all of those things. And what's crazy is people told me later, he goes, we'd be drinking, and next thing you know, Aaron would start preaching the gospel and say, man, I know we're not supposed to be. He couldn't keep from it. Because there's something about when you've ran headlong into truth, and you've let it change you, you will never be the same. You can never go back, the Bible says, to your sin like a dog to its vomit, the same, because you've been changed. And so I believe in some ways the conviction of knowing that tormented him. Well, he ended up in an altercation at a bar, ended up running out in the Ohio River, trying to get away from some cops, got pulled down in the Ohio River, and they pulled his body out 3 days later. And so I remember like getting the call of what had happened. And so I'm going down to the Ohio River. I'm, you know, I don't know, a year and a half, maybe 2 years. I don't even know if it had been 2 years. Saved, you know, hadn't been drinking, hadn't been getting high. And here are all these people I hadn't seen, and they're dealing with what the situation the way they know how. They're getting high. And I got offered more free drugs those 3 days than I'd ever been in my life. And, you know, I'm broken. I'm like, man, I remember my other cousin, his twin, Alan, saying, man, I'm just waiting for him to come walking up the river. And if it was not for those bundles of grace from God, I would not have stayed sober, and I would not have been who I am today. And I remember getting the call on Sunday that they pulled him out of the river. And going up there, putting my hand on his body, like knowing it's him. And it doesn't mean that those things weren't hard. It doesn't mean that those things weren't difficult. But in those moments, I knew the truth of Jesus saying, I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. And in those moments, I had a special grace to walk through that unless you've experienced it, it's impossible to explain.
That hit me hard, man. Not something that I'm ready for camera yet, but I'm gonna have to tell you a story later.
Yeah,
It lines up really well with that. You talk about how when we become faced with truth, like really faced with truth, we're never going to be the same, regardless of where we fall back to, where we go forward, whatever direction. In some way, we're never going to be the same. And I definitely experienced that when I think I came into that truth for the first time during my battle with cancer, because I really was very quickly and very starkly shown the capacity for human suffering, but within that, the capacity for human strength in the face of that suffering. That's where the message of the impossible came from. Everything we're doing now, like all rooted back then. And what's crazy is back then, I had like, I can't even say like, oh, I read this really good book and it inspired that. There's no story. It just literally came to me. And, I have no other explanation for it than that, but it was something that gave me purpose, something to latch onto, something to really drive forward back in that time. And I was actually really from like a mental, emotional, spiritual state. For the most part, I was in pretty good shape while I was battling cancer, when you would think I'd have every reason not to be. It was after that that I fell into drinking because, and I don't think I realized it at the time, but what I can look back and see now is that I was so intimately attuned to these truths of the human condition and suffering and strength and all of these things. And I was immediately went from that space where I'm fighting for my life every single day and go directly into a space where I'm back into quote unquote normal life. And not only that, but I go basically get out of that situation and go to college with all of these new people I've never met before, never known, who just all had the best summer of their lives traveling the world, or at least that's the story I was telling myself. And then here I was, barely escaped with my life, have no medical explanation as to why, yet here I am. And then now I've got to relate to these people, and build friendships and relationships. And I'm still like deeply traumatized by everything I just went through. And so it created this situation where I still wanted, and this is what's weird to explain to people, I still wanted to live that truth. I still wanted to fight that fight. The avenue I was drawn to, though, was alcohol, because that was a way I could fight myself. I could drink more than anybody. I could drink longer than anybody. I could drink harder than anybody, and that I would prove it every single time. That it became like the mission, the goal every single time. And it's weird to look back on because I was still living that same kind of impossible mindset, just under a very unfortunate set of circumstances. And the whole time this is going on, I constantly, you talk about like your cousin, like starting to preach the gospel, even when he's drinking. It's like the whole time I knew there was so much more within me. There was so much more that I had a responsibility to pull out and display and to live. And yet I was in this spiral of just not being able to step out of that. And it wasn't until I found an avenue that was actually healthy for me, that actually built strength, that actually allowed me to move in a positive direction, that I was able to shift that message from the alcohol into lifting and into running, and then ultimately into our business now and the podcast platform and the stories we get to tell and everything like that. But it's like it was that same, I was